this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solution Info Show. I'm your host, Marcia Teele, and if you've watched us in the past over the last 6 years that we've been providing this program, welcome back. And if you're a new caregiver and new to the show and you found us just for the very first time, I want to welcome you too. This is a program that was designed and developed just for you, the family caregiver. If you're caring for someone who can't care for themselves and you're there for them through thick and thin, day and night, it is difficult to say the least. And it is very hard. And so this program is for you to learn from other caregivers, to learn from experts in the field, to learn from people who have been there, done that, so your caregiving journey can be just a little bit better. And so today we have another wonderful program for you. I'm excited about today. We have a guest, and then we're going to have a professional. And my guest today is an actual family caregiver. And she is going to talk to us about her situation, tell us what she's doing, how she's doing it, and how she makes it through every single day. So I want to welcome Arthita. She's joining us today from her home in the Tampa, Florida area. Hi, Arthita. Welcome to the Caregiver Solution Info Show.
Hello, Marcia. Nice to be here.
Well, I am so happy to have you join us today. Can you go ahead and tell us about your caregiving situation? Who are you caring for?
I'm caring for my 97-year-old mother.
Wow, that's something. So how long have you been caring for her?
I moved my mother in with us in June of 2018, so it's almost 3 years.
So she came to live with you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what prompted that move? Why did you feel that you needed to move your mom in with you into your home? What happened?
Well, she was living in Oklahoma, and she was living on her own by herself, and she had some situations where she had to have home health care come in, and she wasn't progressing as they thought was best for her. And I had someone helping that lived right across the street, but then their family matters began to, take over. So she needed, continuous care.
So you live in Florida. She was across the country. You must have worried about her quite a bit, being that she was probably about 93 years old or so when you brought her to live with you. That must have been difficult, trying to help her from afar.
Yeah, it was a bit. Yeah, it was kind of hard. I would try and make a trip there once a month to check on her and see how she was doing when things started to change in her health.
So you're her primary caregiver now, and she's been with you about 3 years. Arthita, What's the hardest part in this last 3 years that you've been caregiving for your mom? What's the hardest part for you?
I think that would be to see the changes that are happening to her because she was always independent and very lively and active. And due to the dementia and how it can take control, and just seeing those changes in her is kind of hard.
I imagine that's very difficult to watch and see how she is changing. Did you expect these changes? Were you aware of what was going to happen because she was diagnosed with a form of dementia? Did you kind of know what to expect, or were you actually surprised?
Um, I had an aunt that passed away a couple of years ago, and my cousins were caring for her, and they kind of gave me a little bit of a heads up of things that might happen, as far as her cognitive abilities and also her mobility and things like that, that she might be slowing down and not remembering and um, finding it hard to you know, make a complete sentence sometimes. She can't find the words some of the time.
So you had a little bit of an inkling, maybe what to expect, but it's never that way when you're in it and you're actually doing it. What kind of assistance does your mom need? What do you provide for her?
Well, whenever we have to go somewhere, I help her with her bathing and getting her dressed um, due to safety reasons because I don't want her to, maybe fall in the bathtub or something like that. So I'm there to help bathe her and get her dressed and things of that nature.
Well, I'm sure you're there, and she needs all the assistance that she needs. You're giving to her, and that's a lot because people that are older and have dementia, they need a lot of attention. So let me ask you this: do you have other obligations that you need to tend to in your home?
My husband.
I would say he's a priority obligation. So he lives there,
Yes.
and how can does it affect your relationship at all? Do you think with the third person and being a caregiver and having mom, does it affect that nucleus relationship, or have you all been able to adjust to that?
We've been able to adjust. Usually, like on the days, my mom goes to an adult day center 2 days out of the week. And on one of those days, we do a day date and, spend time together doing fun things. Um, my mom and my husband are very good buddies. So,
Oh,
so they get along really well. Yeah.
that's a good thing because that might not always be the case with people. That's
Yeah,
great. But what
that's true.
about you? Are you taking care of yourself? Do you get tired? Do you get run down? Do you get overwhelmed at times?
There are times that I get overwhelmed and tired. Um, and I have to step back and realize that I've got to do some things for myself and have a little quiet myself. Also, I go to a support group that's sponsored through the Center for Caregiver Support, and they have support groups once a month, also luncheons once a month. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. So you get out and take care of what you need for yourself. Have you found it beneficial to go to the support groups?
Yes, I have because everyone there is going through a different type of situation with their loved ones. And in the support group, there's no judgment. You're able to be open and talk about things that you're going through. And sometimes, I listen to other caregivers and I'm like, I don't have it so bad. So That's kind of helpful. Yeah, when I can think about,
And then at the
how someone else is going through something.
Sure, sure. So everybody's got a different situation, and by sharing, and I'm sure because you feel like you're not in their situation, maybe you can add a tip or so a little bit of advice to help somebody else, because that's what it's all about is, sharing with others. Do you participate with outside other caregivers? Do you get together face to face? Do you have time to do that, or are you just too busy for that?
Well, they do have, they've started having a lunch and brunch once a month, and the different support groups have it at different locations. And I've started going to the luncheons, and that's kind of a social event for the caregivers. So,
That's good. You need that. You need to have a little bit of you time. So if there's a new caregiver or any caregiver actually, watching us now, listening to your story, what recommendations would you give to a caregiver, especially one starting out?
um, I think first and foremost is to find out what exactly the diagnosis is for your loved one, and to get as much information on that as you can, and talk with their primary care physician so you know exactly what their illness is and what you can do to help your loved one.
Anything else that you would say?
Uh, I think that it takes prayer, which I do regularly because prayer changes things and changes people. And sometimes that's the strength you need to be able to do a caregiver's job.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Arthita. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all that you do for your mom and for other caregivers, and sharing all of that. And thank you so much. And I wish you and your mom and your husband the best of luck always.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time. And we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to find out exactly how Arthita got the help that she needed. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Joining me now is Taylor Conley. Taylor is the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Caregiver Support. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. We just heard from Arthita about her story, taking care of her mom who's 97 years old, and some of the difficulties she's gone through, but she's actually found a lot of help and a lot of support through your company. So I'm so glad for you to be here so you can share with us exactly what you do, how you support caregivers. So my first question is, when did you co-found this Center for Caregiver Support?
So we started the Center for Caregiver Support in July of 2020. Yes, it was during COVID that we decided to start this company. And I'll give you just a little bit of backstory if that's okay. I have two amazing business partners, Michelangelo Mortellero with Mortellero Law and Michael Valdez with Synergy Wealth Alliance. And this was actually their baby. This was their idea back in 2019. And what they realized is that they needed somebody who kind of knew the world of gerontology and knew the world of caregivers to spearhead it. And so we sat down and we talked, and their vision was that we would do support groups in the Tampa area and beyond. And so then when I came on board and I saw the vision of what I've always wanted to do, the three of us just kind of came together and realized that we all wanted the same thing. And so that is how the business got started.
Well, you know what? Some good things come out of the COVID pandemic, because this is when your new business was born, and it has already helped many, many people, just like we heard from Arthita that she found support in your company. So I want to talk about a lot of the things that the center provides, because I know that it's just not support groups, which is a huge thing. It's a great thing to have, but you go a little bit above and beyond the support groups. But first, talk about those support groups and who can join. Is it open to anybody? How often do you have them? Can you tell me about those?
Sure. Our groups are open to anybody. We do have virtual support groups. We have in-person support groups, which are held at adult day centers, assisted livings, and local churches throughout Florida. And we actually are adding new support groups each week. And we do have a Facebook group where we post all of it's a private Facebook group where we post all of our upcoming seminars or support groups, as well as our website, which I can get into a little bit later.
Great, great. Well, that's first and foremost. You know, you and I have known each other for 20 years, and we know that support groups are very helpful to people. And, you know, it's difficult sometimes for a caregiver to take that first step and say, I need help. But if the first support group they go to, not for them, we keep telling them, keep going, because you'll find your home, you'll find your new family, people that are there for you and support you, and someone you can share your journey with. And so obviously it's helped Althea, and it's wonderful that you're doing that. But you do a lot more. So I know that we probably don't have time today to go into everything that the center provides, but let's touch on a few of those. So besides the support group, tell me about the counseling, because once a caregiver starts support groups, sometimes they feel that maybe they need more. Maybe they need professional assistance, someone that is professionally trained to help them through this caregiving journey. Tell me about your counseling services.
Sure. Right now, we are offering counseling at assisted living communities, and these counseling sessions can be utilized to help a family through the transition when their loved one moves into an assisted living. They can be utilized to help a family caregiver understand maybe some of the behaviors that their loved one is exhibiting, and ways to deal with those behaviors. We also do COVID counseling if somebody is kind of struggling with their loved one that may have gone through COVID or dealt with COVID, as well as towards the end. We don't want to wait until somebody passes away or is necessarily on hospice at the very end. We want to do some grief counseling through that process to help them along through every stage. We will be in an office hopefully in July or August, and at that point we can do individual counseling at the office. So that should be a couple of months down the road, but right now we are offering it at local assisted living communities.
Oh, that's so important that you mentioned that, because we know that sometimes families are apprehensive, feel a little guilty when they need to bring someone for more care into a memory care community. They just sometimes can't get over that hump. By having someone that's there and trained and can help them, I think that's going to make a lot of difference in families and in how they feel about what they're doing for their loved one, not necessarily what they're doing to them. And I always say that's a huge difference. One little word makes a lot of difference. You're helping, and you're helping your parent, you're helping your spouse, and you're doing for them, not to them. And I think, people listening out there should take that to heart, because it really does make a difference in changing that mindset. Arthita mentioned lunch and bunch, that she got to go to have lunch with other caregivers. You started that. Tell me why you started that, and how does that work?
If I can, I just want to share a little bit more about Arthita, because you had mentioned this a little bit earlier. Arthita started in a virtual support group during COVID, and I think that gave her the comfort of what a support group was really like. And then the next month she came in person. And then the next month is when we started our luncheon bunches. And then she came to the luncheon bunch where she connected with other caregivers. And our whole vision at the Center for Caregiver Support is to connect, support, and inspire. And she is the perfect example of what we're trying to do to help people through their journey as a caregiver. And so what the luncheon bunches are is it's a very informal support group. Right now, we're hosting them at outside restaurants, and some independent assisted living communities are hosting them as well. And it's just an informal setting. We do have a facilitator who has had years of experience facilitating support groups, and she kind of keeps the group on track, makes sure that people are connecting with people that are going through, caregivers that are going through similar situations. And we have invited some past caregivers that we've known throughout the years that can kind of help those caregivers as well. So it's been very well received in all of our markets. And just like Arthita mentioned, she's really getting a lot out of connecting and having lunch with other caregivers. And it's no cost to the caregivers. They do get to attend the first 2 for free. And then we just take a small minimum donation for the charity of our choice for each month. But those groups are growing. So I'm really excited that the community's been very receptive to those.
Yeah, it's great for the caregiver to have an outlet, and not just a support group, but to meet and to have fun, because we know that caregivers sometimes don't feel like they deserve fun, and they don't deserve to go out to lunch, and they feel guilty when they do. So this is all great to promote all of this, and kudos to you for doing that. You also
Thank you. I did want to add, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I just wanted to add that they can bring their loved one. We don't want anybody to feel like they can't come because they're a caregiver. So we do allow their loved one to go with them. And going back to Arthita, she did bring her mom to the first one, then decided she wanted to come to the next one by herself because she wanted to have fun with new friends. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you also, on your website, which I got to take a look at, which is a really good, full of information, but you also list different events. So if a caregiver wants more than a lunch and bunch or support group, you also post local events on your website that they can possibly take advantage of and go to, right?
Yes, anybody that has a caregiver event, we're willing to post those on our website because we want the community to know, the community of caregivers to know what's out there. And that's the whole purpose, is to help caregivers no matter what. And so, I encourage professionals to share those with me so that I can get them up and share those with the caregivers that are looking for, whether it's virtual or in-person education. There are resources out there that caregivers are not aware of.
Yes, and we're going to talk about more of those resources that you can provide as soon as we come back from our commercial break. So we're going to take a quick break and stay with us. We'll be back more from Teele and her new business, which is blooming and blossoming and so successful already. But we'll hear more in just a moment. We'll be right back.
Arden Court's memory care community has the expertise and experience to simplify and enhance your loved one's life and to protect you, finding the peace of mind you deserve. Come, see the difference in a facility like Arden Courts that is 100% dedicated to Alzheimer's and dementia care can have on your loved one. Call us at 888-478-2410 or visit our website, arden-courts.com. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Welcome back. At this time, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Community. Arden Courts has about 50 memory care assisted livings throughout the United States and 10 of them here in my state of Florida. Arden Courts is a leader when it comes to memory care, helping not only the person with memory problems, but also the family in terms of lots of support and information and hand-holding, both literally and figuratively. One of the resources that Arden Courts would like to provide to you is this book. It's called The 36-Hour Day. This is a wonderful resource for caregivers. It is chock full of information, definitions, explains the different types of dementia from Alzheimer's to Parkinson's, vascular, all kinds of different dementias that you can find out about here, and also about what the symptoms and the behaviors that go along with it. This book is wonderful. It was written by Dr. Peter Rabins and Nancy Mace, and it's continually being updated. Caregivers love this book. So if you haven't had a chance to get this book and read it, I would highly recommend you doing so. And today, just because you've joined us in watching this program, Arden Courts would like to offer this book to you for absolutely free. All you have to do is give them an email with your name and address and telephone number, and that email address is delray, that's D-E-L-R-A-Y, at arden-courts.com. Delray at arden-courts.com. Tell them that you heard about the free offer on the Caregiver Solution Info Show, and they'll be very happy to get a book right to you. You'll be very happy that you did that. So I'm excited today. My special guest is Teele Conley. Teele is the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Caregiver Support, and she's here with us today telling us about her company and how she has started to support caregivers in the Tampa area and beyond. So Teele, let's talk a little bit more about the Center for Caregiver Support. And you explained, why you started it. You wanted to start with support groups, but there's so much more now that it's evolved, and it's so exciting. And I want to applaud you for, really providing this type of service. But you're in the Tampa area, and I want to make sure that if people are listening, maybe there are other places in Florida or beyond, what is your service area right now?
So at this time, we are focusing on the Tampa Bay area, but we are getting calls outside of Tampa. So we are ramping up to provide service for the state of Florida and beyond. We are projecting that a couple of years down the road, we will be national. And so we are looking to hire and looking to interview people. So if anybody out there is interested, just reach out and let us know, and we can have a conversation about that.
That's great. That's great. So I want to get into some of the services that you provide for the caregivers. And obviously, a lot of these services are in your general Tampa area. But I just want to let caregivers know, if you hear something we're talking about, you can probably find similar resources in your community. You just might not be aware that they exist. So if you're going to hear something that Teele talks about, don't think that you don't have access to it because you're not in Tampa or not in Florida. There are lots of ways to access the information, but I guess it's the knowledge of the information out there in the first place is what you need to know. So we're going to go through some of this, Teele, so people will know what is available for caregivers. talk about the resource page that you have on your website, and let's go through some of the highlights of some of the more popular ones that people probably would need to know about. And I guess that would start with home care, because I have a next door neighbor and she takes care of her mom who's 83 who has Alzheimer's, and she just realized, hey, I need help. And she'll call me over. Mom just the other day slipped out of the wheelchair and she called me. She said, are you home? Mom slipped out of the wheelchair. I happened to be, right down the street. So I said, I'll be right there. And I went over and helped get Mom up, and then later helped get Mom tucked in. And she said, Marcia, you're not always going to be at home. I need help. So I encouraged her to call for home health, and she did. And so these are things that, caregivers can do, and home health is usually a first step. So when you are counseling and talking to caregivers, how are they to know about home health, and how do they pick one?
What I'm finding is, especially with COVID, more and more people are needing help. Things are starting to open back up again, and caregivers really need a break. Or their loved one has had a decline and they know that they need services in the home or wherever home may be. And so we have put together a resource directory that we're still building at this time. And we have vetted home care companies that we know have the staffing requirements for what the family's looking for. I have a family I worked with, I'll give an example, probably about a month ago, and they needed somebody 24/7. Now, the company that they went with has a couple different caregivers in there, but now the family has the peace of mind. They don't have to worry about mom, and the daughter was actually able to take a vacation because they had that set up in the home. So I'm getting phone calls every day for families that are looking for home care. And, if there's not somebody in our local area, then we will call around and ask other professionals and vet other companies that are out of our area to make sure that we're helping families get their needs met, because it is important that, some of these caregivers work and they need somebody there during the day. A lot of things have gone virtual, but sometimes, like Arthita said, she uses the opportunity with the adult day center to go on a date day with her husband. That's important for caregivers to have that time. Have a home care company come in just so you can go get out for a couple hours and go grocery shopping. So we definitely are a resource to family caregivers to make sure that we're finding what they're looking for.
Also, there's adult day centers where people can take their loved ones. So if it's not just needing actual physical help in the home with the activities of daily living, like bathing, dressing, toileting, those kinds of things, people can actually get more stimulation. And why is that good for someone to check out adult day centers if their loved one is home and maybe the caregiver can't be the entertainer also?
I'm a big proponent of adult day centers because they get the socialization that they're missing if they're home alone with one other caregiver. Not everybody's social, but even just sitting down and having a meal with other people that are going through the same thing is important for that loved one to experience. And again, going back to the caregiver getting a break, that's a full day break for that caregiver. And I went through it personally with my grandmother. My dad was caring for my grandmother. I always say he was her nurse, chauffeur, everything, chef. And she started going to an adult day center part-time, and it was a world of difference. He was a different person because he got to relax. He wasn't worried about, every move she was going to make, and she couldn't be left alone. So I am a big proponent of adult day centers. And, even if somebody doesn't need it right now, I think that when you don't need it is the time to look into it, because the day will come when there's a crisis, and you don't want to be in a crisis looking at what your options are.
Absolutely. Don't wait for a crisis. That's the worst time to make decisions, the worst time to find what you need. And sometimes in a crisis, as you and I have experienced, many times with caregivers that wait too long, they can't get what they want. Especially talking about like an assisted living for memory care. That takes a little bit more research, vetting to make sure that you're going to be getting what you want. And if you wait for a crisis, there might not be room at the inn at that time. And then you're kind of forced to pick a second, third, or fourth choice that you may not be happy with. So do you help people too when it comes to looking at the next step after daycare in the or home health in the home and then adult daycare? The next step is usually memory care, especially for people that have dementia, or people have dementia at different levels, as we know, and we're not talking about that today, but there are different levels, and people need different things at different levels and different care and different support. But memory care is the next step for many times after home health and adult daycare. So do you help transition and help those caregivers realize when the next step is?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have a story. As you can tell, I'm a storyteller. I think that's the easiest way for me to express and have caregivers understand like the shoes that they're walking in. But I recently had a family caregiver that I spoke with on the phone, and she was only looking for home care options. And when I kind of emailed her the report that I put together, I said, I'm going to give you some homework, and I do want you to go look at a couple assisted living communities, even though that's not what you're thinking. Mom was in the hospital. They wanted to go straight back home for home care. The reason I did that is because the daughter needed a break. The caregiver really needed a break. She was doing it all, and I wasn't certain that they were prepared to take on what her new needs were going to be at home. They actually coincidentally did end up going to an Arden Courts for what was going to be a 1-week respite. It turned into a 2-week respite because the daughter realized at that moment what a break felt like and how bad she needed that break. And so again, like that encouragement for caregivers to look at the options when they don't think they need it, because you may not realize how badly you need it. And unless you experience walking into a place, that's the moment when you can feel it, see it, sense it, and make that decision.
And you mentioned the word respite. Some caregivers, especially new caregivers, they might not know what that means. Can you talk about what respite means?
I can. So respite is when a caregiver, they might be going on vacation, they might just need a break, and they call an assisted living, ask if this is an option. And sometimes there is a 7-day minimum, sometimes there's no minimum, some places have 30-day minimums, but it would be a temporary stay for their loved one to go into an assisted living. I know some long-term care facilities do respite as well. Respite can also be offered in the home. There are some companies that offer, the Dementia Spotlight Foundation, I know, is a friend of ours, Marcia, and he offers free respite services for some caregivers. So there are resources out there where if caregivers are at their wit's end, they can get a respite, which is ultimately just a break for them.
Yeah, and we encourage respite because caregivers need to take care of themselves, and sometimes it's necessary for them to go out of town, and sometimes they just need to take a staycation and have their loved one go to a place and have fun and be safe and have activities and be well cared for. So a respite is not just for the caregiver, but a respite is also for the person being cared for, because believe it or not, sometimes that person needs a break from their caregiver, because being together 24/7, you can actually get on each other's nerves. So I think that it works for both of them very well sometimes. So caregivers should definitely check that out and consider that, because your loved one may have a really good time, and you're going to have a rest, and it's all going to be good when you get back together. So great. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Taylor is going to share with us about the Caregiver Roadmap and what that means and what she can do. So we'll be right back after this short break.
Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
My guest today is Teele Conley. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Caregiver Support. So, Teele, you provide something to caregivers called the Caregiver Roadmap. Tell us what that is.
Sure. One thing that we have found over the years is that caregivers don't know where to start. They don't know where to start their journey. And a lot of times when caregivers call us, they are in crisis. And my hope for the future is that a couple of years from now, caregivers aren't waiting for the crisis, that they've actually planned their journey when it starts, rather than wait until they're in the middle of the storm. And so what a caregiver roadmap is we sit down with a family and we look at what the immediate needs are, and we're going to break it out into a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And what we're going to tackle at first in the first 30 days are the crisis. What are they going through that needs to be addressed today? And I'm going to utilize a guide, which is, I know you've seen this before, Marcia, the Family Caregiver Manual, which is written by David Levy. And we use this as a guide, and it comes with the packages that we provide. And I hold the caregiver's hand, per se, I'm not going to write the entire plan with them, but I'm going to help them on a weekly basis go through everything they need to write their own plan. They might need, like you had mentioned, home health. They might need adult daycare. And what is that going to look like? When are they going to need it? Then once we're done with the first 30 days, I call the next 30 days, the 60 days, I call that the time to breathe. They're kind of feeling relaxed. We've gotten through the crisis. We've addressed all of those topics and those issues. And then we're going to look at what is going to help the caregiver the most. The first 30 days is typically about helping their loved one. The next 30 days, it's helping the caregiver. So we're going to go through and see if, they want to start going and looking at assisted living or long-term care. I met with somebody yesterday that I recommended going to look at the veterans home because her husband would qualify for the veterans home. And it's not too early to put him on the list, even if they don't need it for 5 years. It doesn't hurt to go now. So that's part of that 60 days. And then the 90 days is when it's smooth sailing. Let's talk about everything that's going to help you. Do you have a pharmacist that you have a strong relationship with that's going to look at all the medications to make sure that your loved one is okay? That's going to look at all of the caregivers' medications to make sure that that person's okay and that the doctors aren't over-prescribing medications from different angles. And so our caregiver roadmaps we all know that there's going to be bumps in the road as a caregiver. There's no avoiding those bumps in the road. But if we can help them on that highway, then it's going to be a lot easier of a drive through the journey. And part of that 90-day plan is connecting those caregivers to the luncheon bunches, to support groups. It's never too early in the process as a caregiver to start reaching out to other caregivers because chances are you're going to learn something from people that are ahead of the game.
Well, that's really important. And once they get the roadmap, what if their journey lasts for years and maybe they need to get another map or they need to look at detours? How do you address that?
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because some of the families that I work with will only need us for 90 days. And many of those families will continue on. And what we do is we talk on a weekly basis. They get an hour phone call where one week they may just want to vent about their situation one-on-one. The next week it may be, these are behaviors that I'm dealing with and I just don't know what to do. And that's how we uncover what resources they're needing at the time. And so, because caregivers can only live in the moment, we want to make sure it's a short-term goals with long-term vision. And so many caregivers will continue after that 90 days, but we just want to worry about the first 90 days, and then we'll talk about, continuing as we get closer.
Well, I like the analogy, the roadmap and the driving through on your caregiving journey and the bumps and the detours. And sometimes you got to take a side road because, your map might say, go on this street, but that street is blocked. There's construction. So now we've got to take a detour or go a different route. And so it's always fluid. And that's what I've learned, helping caregivers, is that you have to be fluid. You have to be prepared and not be so rigid. You have to be able to have your plan. And plan A doesn't work, go to B. And that doesn't work, go to C. And so that sounds like what you're helping the caregivers with, is navigating that roadmap to get to the right place at the right time with the right mindset. And that is wonderful, because you're right, caregivers sometimes are just so overwhelmed. They have no way to even begin, and that just shuts them down, and that's not good for anybody. So that is a wonderful thing, and caregivers need that. So thank you for providing that. We've talked a lot about things here today, about resources, and just to mention a few of the others that you can help families with. You told me earlier you have financial planners that can help, elder law attorneys that can help, information on your website for VA benefits, so people can find out about that, even about Medicaid information. Social workers, sometimes people need access to a social worker. We sometimes just can't flip through our phone and go to social worker and have somebody listed, so we need to call you. And so this is a great support for families. So talk about how a family can contact you, how they can look up your website to get more information and give all that information so we can help you help others.
Sure. So the website is www.thecenterforcaregiversupport.com. Our phone number is 813-575-0066. And we do have a private Facebook group that I mentioned earlier, and it's a place where caregivers can go and read uplifting stories, and it's really a place to connect, support, and inspire each other. So we do have all of our seminars and support groups and luncheon bunches posted on there as well. So if you just go to Facebook and look up the Center for Caregiver Support, then we'll approve you to be a part of that group and connect with other caregivers and see what's going on in their world. And I just love that we formed this community of caregivers who they may never have met in person, but they've connected because of what we're doing at the Center for Caregiver Support. And I think it's important because if you're not a caregiver now, chances are you're going to be a caregiver at some point in your life, or you're going to need a caregiver. So, it's very important that people are getting the support that they need.
Absolutely. So we're talking about caregivers and talking to caregivers. Give us your best thoughts on caregiving, as far as if you're brand new, you've just been thrown into a situation, and where do you start? I mean, our Theta said go to your primary care, which was a great idea and a great advice, because you want to know what you're dealing with. You want to know what kind of memory loss it is. Is it Alzheimer's? Is it Parkinson's? Is it, from a stroke for, that kind of vascular dementia? So that was great advice. And then after that doctor's visit and the test that probably will go along with it at the neurologist and going through and just basically getting a proper diagnosis, what do they do next?
So one thing I do want to add to that, I think definitely, a lot of caregivers should discuss everything that Arthita mentioned with their primary care physician. If there's a local memory care clinic of some sort in your area, I do always recommend getting a second diagnosis from them. And from a personal perspective, I've seen quite a few people who have had a misdiagnosis, and then once they went to like an Alzheimer's research center, like here in Tampa, we have the Bird Institute, gotten a proper diagnosis and gotten on proper medications. So I did just want to add that. If anybody has questions, they can feel free to reach out and ask. But after getting the diagnosis, that's a really tough time. And I know caregivers often feel alone. Their loved one often feels alone. And there are many support groups out there. Some of the support groups will have the caregiver and their loved one, if the loved one is in like early stage Alzheimer's or dementia, and they're able to talk about it and talk about it with other people. And I think the biggest thing with connecting, from what I have seen through the years, is it really does help to make the caregiver a better caregiver, which in turn allows them to care for their loved one even better. And so it's just a healthier situation all around. And I think education is very important. Seminars, so many things are virtual now as well, but I think getting as much education and knowledge as possible about your loved one's disease or whatever they're going through is only going to help make that caregiver journey a little bit easier.
Absolutely. So education really is key. So people should tune in to Caregiver Solutions Info Show at caregiversolutions.info. And every week, every Tuesday, we have wonderful guests like Teele on the program and people giving you their expert advice because they know what they're talking about. And you can trust that they have experienced this, they have the knowledge and the personal relations with caregivers to be able to share this. So Teele, one more time, give us your phone number that they can reach out to you and your website again for your organization.
Okay, sure. The phone number is 813-575-0066, and the website is the Center for Caregiver Support.com, and then find us on Facebook as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure seeing you again and talking with you and learning about all that you do and how you can help caregivers. I've truly enjoyed my time with you today.
Thank you, Marcia. Me as well.
And for all the rest, get this book too. Tune into Teele's organization. Look her up on the web. Give her a call. Tell her that you enjoyed her information. And don't forget to email Arden Courts, delray@arden-courts.com. It helps if it's not upside down. And ask for the 36-hour-day book because it's a really good resource. Tune in to us next week. We'll have more information, Caregiver Solution Info Show, every week at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, every Tuesday. And we also can be heard on the iHeartRadio app the same time under WNN. So you can listen, you can watch, get connected. That's what it's all about. So until then, you all have a good evening and take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more